Infinite evolution, the void rises in the Marvel Universe. Like, share and subscribe. Episode 31. Asking for the relic. My business is over. Let's go up and talk about other things. I don't know if you can save me and talk to Pepper. Beforehand, I didn't tell her what I was talking to you about. Pepper just wanted to chat with you who are attracted by many rich women. Immediately, Tony Stark spoke. You do not mind? Hearing this, Harvey glanced at Tony and said. You look handsome, but your appearance looks much younger than Pepper. She doesn't have that much money, so she can't afford to take care of you. As long as you don't tease Pepper, I don't mind. Tony Stark waved his hand upon hearing this, and said without any worries. Since you don't mind, then I don't care. As for flirting with beautiful women, it's never been my style. I've always been approached by others. Harvey spread his hands and said indifferently. Okay, let's go. Tony Stark felt relieved when he heard that. Just when Tony Stark was about to leave the dungeon with Harvey. Sir, Mr. Phil Coulson is calling, would you like to answer? The voice of Jarvis suddenly rang out. So fast? Tony Stark said in surprise when he heard the words. Phil Coulson helped him investigate his father's relics, and he even expected that Phil Coulson might use his speech skills to prolong the time, fight for himself and win his favor. Unexpectedly, in just 10 minutes, Phil Coulson called to contact. If it is so fast, it proves that the other party has found his father's relic with a high probability. Maybe their abilities are a little bit higher than you imagined? Harvey said when he heard the words. Then answer first. After Tony Stark heard it, he also stopped his steps to go upstairs, and spoke. And after this connection, it's not just communication but video communication. A black man in a black trench coat with a cyclops, Phil Coulson is standing beside. When the black man saw Tony's side, he spotted Harvey Ambaraka and his eyes flashed. Meeting Tony Stark for the first time. I'm the director of Nick Fury SHIELD, Phil Coulson's boss. And Harvey Ambaraka, the agent of our bureau offended you last time, and I'm here to apologize to that agent. Sorry. Nick Fury took the initiative to introduce himself. Director Nick Fury, SHIELD? Aren't you called Homeland Bureau? Tony Stark was a little strange to hear that name. Just call me Fury. Since it's not just Tony Stark, you mentioned our bureau's name is too long. Harvey Ambaraka also said our bureau name was too long. So we've been thinking about scaling back some of the names. After thinking about it for a long time, we finally came up with a name that is simple, direct and reassuring. Nick Fury also explained when he heard the words. I don't know if the name SHIELD sounds reassuring, but it's much easier to remember than the previous one. Tony Stark said directly when he heard the words made people want to beat him up. Harvey himself sat down directly, took out his mobile phone and started playing. Nick Fury felt a little helpless when he saw that Harvey Ambaraka didn't even look at him. But he also knew that Natasha Romanoff was really easy to leave a bad impression that time. Nick Fury wasn't too surprised that Harvey Ambaraka was at Stark Manor. Harvey Ambaraka now owns a large stake in Tony Stark's company. And basically everyone in New York knows that Harvey Ambaraka and Tony Stark have become friends. Even if Harvey Ambaraka doesn't have a super ability, but the kind of goddess of luck's favor in the dark makes Harvey Ambaraka's future achievements not too low. Both of them have money, and they have similar tastes. Not surprisingly. Let's go with the name first. Let's talk business. We did find something about your father Howard Stark's relics. However, your father has a very important mission in the military, so what he left behind has become a military secret. Nick Fury leaned forward, folded his hands on the table in front of him, and said with a serious face. Talking in a twist and turn, I just want to say, if I want to get it, it's not that easy, isn't it? Tony Stark has also dealt with the military quite a few times, and he definitely knows the tricks of such people. No, it's understandable for your father's relics to be returned to you. The main thing is that I want to know something about you before handing it over to you. You are 39 years old now. In the past so many years, you never thought of asking the military if there are any relics left by your father. Now that I think about it, can I ask why? Nick Fury shook his head upon hearing this, and spoke. Because this. Tony Stark pulled back his clothes, revealing the arc reactor. Rather than saying that he thought of asking for it because of Harvey Ambaraka's reminder, he would rather say that it was because of the arc reactor on his chest. This thing is called the arc reactor. It works very well, and it is also the key to me becoming Iron Man. It's just that for some reason, I need to wear it all the time and can't take it off. I want to find a new element to replace him, but I have tried other elements in the periodic table. It turned out, obviously, that it wasn't found. So I thought about my father, who was as talented as me. I want to see if my father, he, and she have left any relics, which can bring me some inspiration. A complex look appeared on Tony Stark's face, explaining the reason. I see, I'll have Phil Coulson send it to you. I hope your father's relics can bring you some help. Nick Fury looked at the arc reactor with white light shining on Tony Stark's chest, and said without much shock. If Tony Stark doesn't find a replacement element, the SHIELD have something that can alleviate the symptoms of palladium. But remission is always palliative, not the root cause. If Tony Stark wants to live, he still has to find a way for Tony Stark himself. The steel armor made by Tony Stark has amazing combat power. After all, this is equivalent to the humanoid form of a fighter jet, and it is more convenient to move than a fighter jet. It can be said that it is not a super ability person comparable to a super ability person. But if Tony Stark doesn't have much lifespan, then a rare superhero who is expected to be drawn into the Avengers will be gone as soon as possible. Tony Stark nodded slightly when he heard that the complexities on his face disappeared. Episode 32. Mr. Harvey Ambaraka, I hope to forgive the offense of our shield. We have no intention of quarreling with you. Nick Fury looked at Harvey Ambaraka and took the initiative to say hello. I don't care, as long as you don't keep bothering me. The great mission of saving Blue Star has nothing to do with me, a commoner. Harvey heard this, raised his eyes and glanced at Nick Fury, and said. According to your relationship with Tony Stark, maybe you can also drive a battle armor to become a superhero in the future. Nick Fury said when he heard the words. According to the survey, Tony Stark generally only invites women to his home for parties, and rarely invites men to his home. If Tony Stark invites, then it means that the two have a deep friendship. Tony Stark is extremely unwilling to hand over his core technology to the military. But if it were a good friend with Tony Stark might give him a steel armor. So when he said this, Nick Fury was also observing Tony Stark. Nick Fury knew he was right when he noticed that Tony Stark's eyes were a little bright, and he seemed to want to see Harvey Ambaraka in his armor. Let's not talk about whether I can wear the steel armor or not. Who stipulated that one must become a superhero if one wears the armor? Nick Fury, the intentional and unintentional moral coercion in your words is almost enough. Harvey felt that Tony Stark's eyes were a little speechless, but he still looked at Nick Fury and responded directly without any politeness. Nick Fury is more friendly to Harvey Ambaraka because Harvey Ambaraka may get the iron armor from Tony Stark. Unexpectedly, the other party was so shameless, which made Nick Fury feel angry. Harvey Ambaraka, I think we have some misunderstanding, maybe we can talk. However, his professionalism still made Nick Fury restrain his thoughts, and said with a kind smile on his face. I have nothing to talk to you about. The last time your people pointed a gun at me, I reported to the FBI that you officers and officials will protect each other and let you settle it. I can't afford to provoke, but can't I hide? But next time I'm in a hurry, I have enough money to buy my life. Harvey noticed Nick Fury's body froze and sneered. Upon hearing these words, Tony Stark's eyes flashed with shock, and he looked at Nick Fury. He knew that SHIELD went to find Harvey Ambaraka, and wanted to win over Harvey Ambaraka, but he didn't expect the other party's temptation to pull out a gun. Nick Fury heard Harvey Ambaraka's threat, noticed the look in Tony Stark's eyes, and had a headache. He also didn't expect that Natasha Romanoff's actions would make Harvey Ambaraka so disgusted with his shield. But they didn't expect that Tony Stark, who was just a scientist, suddenly produced an epic-making weapon like the iron armor. Not to mention that Harvey Ambaraka would become good friends with Tony Stark. Moreover, what Harvey Ambaraka said obviously knew about the dark web. If they were in a hurry, and Harvey Ambaraka bought their lives directly at a high price, even if they didn't die, they would still be skinned. It might even be possible to die directly. After all, there are death gods with terrifying power on the dark web who are demanding their lives for money. $20 million, they need to do a lot of preparatory work if they want to mobilize, but for a rich man like Harvey Ambaraka, they can take it out at any time. Moreover, this rich man is still very young, and it is not impossible for him to be young and reckless. Mr. Harvey Ambaraka, I am deeply sorry for the actions of our agent. Sorry. We are not enemies. If we have a chance in the future, I hope we can really resolve the misunderstanding. In this regard, Nick Fury could only admit his cowardice, bowed his head and apologized. Nick Fury then hung up on the video chat. After the video communication was hung up. Awesome. Tony Stark looked at Harvey Ambaraka, gave a thumbs up and said in admiration. According to the super ability that Harvey Ambaraka showed in front of him, it is obvious that he is not afraid of S.H.I.E.L.D. But Harvey Ambaraka never thought of exposing his identity, but directly solved it as a young rich man. There is nothing awesome or not, it's just what you should do to maintain your identity. Harvey said calmly. Understood, but Harvey Ambaraka, you really don't have the idea of wearing steel armor? I'm already very good at driving the iron armor. If it were you, as long as you can understand the function, you should be better at driving than me, right? Tony Stark definitely understood, but soon looked at Harvey Ambaraka with bright eyes and asked. The performance of the iron armor is the same, but the level of the driver's ability will still affect the performance. Although he didn't know how powerful Harvey Ambaraka was, he was obviously much stronger than himself. If you are interested in the future, I will take one with you. After hearing this, Harvey took a look at the cool-looking steel armor placed on the innermost wall, thought about it and said. It's okay to take one away now, so that you can have some self-protection abilities, and you can better hide your identity. Tony Stark said when he heard this. Tony Stark, I appreciate your kindness. Now as long as I don't spend money to buy the lives of some people in SHIELD, they can't take action against me, because they made mistakes first. But if I take it, it won't make it easier for me to hide my identity. On the contrary, those guys from SHIELD will attack me on the grounds that I harbor dangerous weapons. Harvey shook his head when he heard the words, and said. Because I reminded and helped Tony Stark many times, Tony Stark felt that he got his help in vain, so he wanted to give him something in return. Harvey doesn't lack for anything, so Tony Stark's will is enough. It seems to be the reason. Tony Stark thought about it after hearing the words, and he also understood. He is one of the richest people in New York along with Harvey Ambaraka, but there is still a difference between them. As long as he survives, Stark Industries will still be America's technological pioneer. He has developed a steel armor, and the military can't directly attack him, they can only find a good excuse. For example, public opinion or other things can get something from him that he doesn't want to hand over. Because the military has no good excuse to ask him for it, all the steel armor is still in his hands. In any case, the military cannot push him too fast, after all, he is a rich man in New York and also a super genius scientist. But Harvey Ambaraka's superficial identity is just a rich man in New York. Money doesn't fight power, and now Harvey Ambaraka and SHIELD are at odds. But Harvey Ambaraka did not make any dangerous moves and did not hold a weapon that symbolized danger. SHIELD Nick Fury, for the sake of his face, couldn't possibly trip up Harvey Ambaraka. Episode 33. Does he hate me? Let's go up and eat. Seeing that Tony Stark understood, Harvey said casually. Good. Tony Stark nodded upon hearing that. This time, the two went directly to the restaurant on the second floor. Originally, for the Chinese New Year, Tony Stark will prepare a lot of delicious food. This time I am planning to go to Harvey Ambaraka during the Chinese New Year, so I have prepared more. It's just that after meeting Harvey Ambaraka, he also asked people to prepare 2 whole beef feasts, so these few tables were not enough to accommodate them at all, just like eating a buffet with rich dishes. Mr. Harvey Ambaraka, the whole beef feast will take more than half an hour to prepare, so let's eat these first, the plates are over there. Pepper laughed when he saw Tony and Harvey Ambaraka coming up from below. Although Pepper was shocked when she saw it for the first time, when she saw Harvey finish the dinner for 100 people without any pressure. Let Pepper have a new understanding of Harvey Ambaraka's appetite. This time, she was not surprised to hear that Tony specially prepared 2 more beef feasts for the other party. Well, please Miss Pepper. Harvey smiled on his face when he heard this, and nodded. Hurry up and eat, there is another guest coming later. Hearing this, Tony Stark picked up a plate and began to choose the delicacies he wanted to eat, and said casually. Then Tony Stark went to sit down at the side table. Are there any guests coming? Men and women? Pepper was also not polite, and directly started to pick up his favorite dishes, and came to the dining table. Hearing Tony's words, he asked, curiously. Harvey Ambaraka directly picked up 2 plates, filled them up for himself and sat at the dining table. It's Phil Coulson, he's bringing me something later. Tony Stark said casually upon hearing the words. What do you guys talk about every time? Why is it involving Phil Coulson again this time? Isn't he an agent who specializes in dealing with weird events? Could it be that what you are talking about is related to weird events, can you tell me? When Pepper heard these words, he felt completely kept in the dark and was extremely curious. Like Tony, Pepper actually talks a lot. Don't you have a lot of things you want to ask Harvey Ambaraka? Tony Stark directly brought the topic to Harvey after hearing the words. Mr. Harvey Ambaraka, are you in the stock and real estate business? Seeing that Tony didn't want to talk about this topic, Pepper's beautiful eyes flashed, but she also looked at Harvey without asking further questions. Strictly speaking, it is a stock business, and real estate is just a side business. Because I don't have much relationship with the military, I can't directly get a development permit to develop some land. I can only buy some properties and wait for the appreciation. Hearing this, Harvey swallowed the food in his mouth first and spoke. Hearing this casual sentence, Pepper was speechless for a moment. I can't even understand his values and logic of behavior, so you don't have to worry about it, Pepper. Tony Stark glanced at Harvey upon hearing this, and said. Harvey Ambaraka has more than $10 million in real estate, and Harvey has more than 100 properties in his name, all over the states of America. Especially the manor where Harvey lived most often. Although he didn't go into the house to see it, it was at least worth hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of land occupation, decoration, and various facilities all over the place. Among them, Harvey Ambaraka has the most real estate in New York, as many as 57 villas. He can understand that Harvey Ambaraka bought some villas in other states and other cities. Because having real estate means that no matter which city you go to, you will have a place where you can live comfortably. It's just that he can't fully understand that New York buys so many. America is still developing constantly, especially in the city of New York, where real estate is constantly appreciating, and it is not impossible to buy it specifically for the appreciation. It's just that according to Harvey Ambaraka's keen vision for stocks, if the money for buying real estate is used in stocks, they can earn more. However, it is also thanks to the many properties under Harvey Ambaraka's name, so almost everyone thinks that Harvey Ambaraka is doing stocks and real estate. So Tony Stark could only convince himself that Harvey Ambaraka simply wanted to keep a low profile and not want to be so conspicuous. Well, Mr. Harvey Ambaraka, I have been asked many times to ask you. What's the matter, you are willing to attend the banquet held by them? Pepper was a little surprised when he heard Tony's words, but he didn't dwell on the question just now, and asked politely. I've received a lot of invitations lately, and I'm worried. Miss Pepper, please tell them. I usually have a lot of things to do, please don't give me meaningless invitations. Harvey said seriously. I'll help you convey it tactfully. Pepper was stunned for a moment when he heard the words with obvious rejection, and then he reacted and agreed with a smile. There are rumors in New York that Harvey Ambaraka is also a playboy, but now it seems that the rumors are not entirely true. At least Harvey Ambaraka didn't have a thing for some rich young lady in New York, that's for sure. Well, please Miss Pepper. Harvey also responded politely when he heard the words. Carrying the finished dishes, he continued to walk towards the tables full of food. Tony, does Mr. Harvey Ambaraka actually hate me? Seeing that Harvey was going to get some food, Pepper asked in a low voice, like a mosquito. Fortunately, Tony Stark's body has strengthened a lot, and his hearing is better than before, otherwise he would not be able to hear clearly. Nothing, if he really doesn't want to see you, he won't be polite to you, but will directly show disgust towards you. So if you don't see how disgusted he is, don't think too much about it. He left just to get food, not as bad as you think. But when Tony Stark heard it clearly, he immediately shook his head and spoke. After several contacts, Tony Stark knew that Harvey Ambaraka was a very proud person. Obadiah Stane is straight up trashed. Nick Fury, the director of SHIELD, also didn't give any face. If Harvey Ambaraka really didn't want to see Pepper, he might not even bother to say anything, let alone respond to Pepper with more polite words. Pepper was also relieved when he saw Harvey Ambaraka, who was serving food. Miss Pepper, how does it feel to be in charge of Stark Industries? Harvey naturally heard what Pepper said, but he just pretended not to see it. After adding the dishes, he continued to sit back and asked casually. Mr. Harvey Ambaraka, I know you are a shareholder of Stark Industries. But it's the first day of the new year, so please don't talk about work. Let me clear my mind and take a good rest for a day. When Pepper heard Harvey talking about Stark Industries, he rubbed his brows with a headache. Now Stark Industry is replaced by her, and Tony himself is constantly doing research to prepare for the transformation of Stark Industry. And she was about to run around, which was not as beautiful as she had imagined at first. I have no right to control the direction of Stark Industries. Naturally, I didn't mean to ask, I just said it casually. Miss Pepper, you don't want to talk about these things, so don't pay too much attention to them. Seeing Pepper's headache, Harvey said while eating. Watching Pepper's life, let's not talk about whether he is attractive or not. But Pepper has been working for Tony Stark since he was young, doing his due diligence, and dealing with Tony Stark's big and small file size matters. Face the arrogant and sometimes maverick and even wayward Tony Stark. Pepper may have a girly side, whine and complain, but in the end she will choose to believe and support Tony Stark. The solid relationship the two had built up over the years made Tony Stark dependent on Pepper. This is also the key to Tony Stark's follow-up, no longer being a playboy, but wanting to marry Pepper. Tony Stark faced the opportunity to completely change himself just now, but he didn't immediately want to gain power similar to him, probably because he was jealous of Pepper's opinion. Harvey already knew all this, so he wasn't surprised when Tony Stark asked himself if he could give Pepper a long life. For Harvey, the more people and things that believe in and join the Void, the better. Anyway, he can get Void energy, and the other party can get a long lifespan and supernatural power. This can be said to be a win-win situation. So Harvey was never worried that he couldn't win other people to believe in and join the Void. After all, the long lifespan alone is enough to drive countless people crazy. I want to create an arc reactor that cannot be copied by others. Now there are some ideas that may be successful, so give me some more time. Tony Stark also knew that the reason why Pepper felt headaches running around was because he was currently in the transition period of the Stark industry. But there is no new energy source, which will cause some dissatisfaction among other shareholders of Stark Industries, and bring some pressure to Pepper. It's just that if the arc reactor he made is leaked out and let other companies get it, it will take some time to analyze it, and it can be copied. So it is impossible for Tony Stark to announce the arc reactor. Tony, you don't have to feel too much pressure. After all, we are transforming into a new industry and not following the old path. Just take it slowly. When Pepper heard Tony's words, he comforted him first. You're laughing, Mr. Harvey Ambaraka. Just now, I just didn't want to be disturbed on my rare rest day. I overreacted. I didn't mean to blame you. Then Pepper looked at Harvey and said with some embarrassment. I know, after all, it's not easy to run a company as big as Stark Industries. Harvey shook his head slightly, expressing that he didn't care, and said. Episode 34. Psychological problems. But it was also because of those words just now, the atmosphere of the few people has improved a lot. After a few people chatted for a while, Pepper curiously inquired about what advantages a woman needs to meet Harvey's goal. Just tell me, I'm also curious about how you chose. Tony Stark started gossiping when he heard the words. If you want to say what advantages you have, it is in line with my heart. It needs the 3 advantages of beauty, intelligence, and strength. After hearing this, Harvey thought about it and said. He occasionally finds some young and beautiful women to spend a good night together, but that's just a behavior that happens when he is out of his mind and occasionally on a whim. It's not about picking a woman who's exactly what you want. Beautiful appearance, smart head, strong heart. There are many who meet the first 2 points, but it is not so easy to meet the last point. Women are not men after all, even if they are strong on the surface, most of them are weak behind the scenes. Pepper heard Harvey's words and said thoughtfully. Tony Stark had a different feeling when he heard Harvey Ambaraka's merit standard. The first point of beauty that Harvey Ambaraka said is that it is easy to understand and beautiful in appearance. And intelligence should not be as simple as being smart, but to understand Harvey's thoughts through a few words. Knowing what to say and what not to say, what to do and what not to do, this alone can eliminate countless women. Because women are emotional, they may cry because of some things, and they may not be able to keep calm because of some things. And what Harvey Ambaraka said about being strong should not only mean a strong mind, but also a strong enough strength. Otherwise, let alone supporting each other with Harvey Ambaraka, the other party may not be able to understand Harvey Ambaraka's thoughts and behaviors. Women who meet the standard, Tony Stark thought about it in his mind, but couldn't find a woman who met. Your standards are a bit idealistic. I'm afraid that if you look at the whole world, it will be difficult to find a woman who really meets your wishes. So Tony Stark spoke. I know, but I have a lot of time to look for it. It doesn't matter if I can't find it in the end. Harvey laughed when he heard Tony's words. Your words are too absolute. Although the requirements are very high, there are still many strong women in the world who are beautiful, smart, and strong in heart. When Pepper heard the words, he felt that what Tony and Harvey said were too sure, and retorted. Pepper, you failed to understand what he meant. Tony said quickly when he heard the words, and after he finished speaking, he glanced at Harvey, wanting to see Harvey's reaction. It is very easy to arouse a person's resentment when someone who cannot understand the topic interrupts forcibly. Yes, but you will understand, too, Miss Pepper, if you have the chance. Harvey felt Tony's look at him and said with a smile. Harvey Ambaraka's unintentional words made Tony Stark's eyes flicker. Is this hinting to himself that Pepper may also gain power, or is it simply because he thinks too much? Is it possible for her? To confirm, Tony Stark looked at Harvey and asked. It depends on whether you can convince me. Harvey said meaningfully after hearing the words. Give me some time, I have to think about it and talk to her. Hearing this, Tony Stark knew that Pepper also had some opportunities. Even if this opportunity needed to be fought for, it was undoubtedly good news for him. Whatever. Harvey showed an indifferent look on his face when he heard the words, and continued to quickly destroy the food in front of him after speaking. What are you guys saying? Who is she? Is it suitable for Mr. Harvey Ambaraka's favorite woman? Pepper heard the conversation between Tony and Harvey, and what he heard was misty, and asked a little strangely. No, I'll explain it to you if I think it's okay. If I didn't take the initiative to tell you, then don't inquire too much. Tony Stark shook his head upon hearing this, and spoke. Now he himself doesn't know whether he wants to accept it or not. And even if he accepted, whether Harvey Ambaraka was willing to agree or not was one thing. After all, he is not the leading party in the matter of requesting Harvey Ambaraka to make himself an extraordinary existence. Not to mention getting Harvey Ambaraka to agree to let Pepper become an existence similar to himself, so it is not yet time to explain. When Pepper heard these words, he became even more curious, wanting to understand what was going on. Just wanted to ask, but when she saw Harvey Ambaraka next to her, she held back her impolite behavior and planned to ask Tony in private. It's too slow to eat like this, I will save some for you, and I will eat there directly. Harvey looked up at Tony, stood up, and said. He knew that the seed of desire had been planted, and now he just had to wait for it to blossom and bear fruit. Humans are a race longing for evolution, longing for a longer lifespan and stronger power. And when it is known that this evolution is not life-threatening, except for those who are willing to be mediocre, anyone who has desires will basically not refuse. Is Tony Stark willing to settle for mediocrity? The answer is obviously not. No matter how his personality changes, the madness of a scientist in Tony Stark's bones will not disappear. Otherwise, Tony Stark would not have created Ultron, a terrifying humanoid weapon, despite the opposition of others. And according to Tony Stark's mind, it is not difficult for Harvey to foresee that Tony Stark will use the ability obtained after joining the Void to create even more terrifying technology. It's okay, you can just eat it directly, our appetite is not big. Tony didn't mind seeing that Harvey wanted to eat quickly. Harvey nodded when he heard the words, and walked to the tables full of food. Although he said he wanted to eat quickly, Harvey didn't gobble it up, and his movements were still graceful. Tony Stark looked thoughtfully at Harvey's prodigious appetite. If he gains power similar to Harvey Ambaraka, gains a lifespan of hundreds or even thousands of years and controls the power of extraordinary, the price is only that his appetite will become bigger. He accepts this price, and he has enough money to eat and drink every day, as long as he doesn't eat people. But now he is still unable to make a decision. He is also very clear. Because of his fame, he is a public figure. The moment he gains power, if he becomes too young, he will definitely be noticed by others at the first time, and then those people will regard him as a different kind. This is a psychological problem, and it is also the most difficult problem to solve. Harvey Ambaraka saw through his current entanglement, so he didn't think about urging him. It just gave him a chance to see if he could figure it out and accept it thoroughly. Episode 35. The Uncontainable Demon. Pepper wanted to ask Tony about it in a low voice, but when she found at the moment Tony frowned, as if he was thinking about something important. So Pepper also refrained from disturbing. But she could feel it, after Tony met Phil Coulson and Harvey Ambaraka and talked about something. Tony's personality and behavior have undergone some changes. Because she took care of Tony for many years and did various things for Tony. So Tony used to tell her his ideas and requirements. Pepper thinks she knows Tony very well, but now Tony has something that he can't explain to her right away. And Tony's conversation with Harvey Ambaraka just now sounded like a few brief sentences. She sounded cloudy, but both Tony and Harvey Ambaraka knew what was going on. It made her feel increasingly elusive about Tony's thoughts. Obviously she and Tony have been together for more than 10 years, and they know each other very well, but now Tony feels strange to her for some reason. It made her completely unable to understand what Tony was thinking all day long. At this time, the sound of the helicopter's rapidly rotating fan blades came from outside the house. Pepper heard the voice and knew it was Phil Coulson coming, and Tony's character would definitely tell him to avoid it. I'm full, you guys are busy first. So Pepper took the initiative to stand up, observing Tony's reaction, with some anticipation deep in his eyes, hoping that Tony would say that he didn't have to leave. Even if it's pouring them a cup of coffee, it's fine without avoiding it. Well, go back to your room and rest for a while. We have something to talk about. No matter what noise you make, don't come down, let alone look at it. You can only come down if you get news from me. But when Tony came back to his senses, when he heard the voice, he nodded. Good. Seeing Tony's reaction, Pepper had expected it but was still a little disappointed. he agreed and went upstairs. Tony had so much on his mind right now that he didn't have time to pay attention to Pepper's mood problems. JARVIS directly released the situation of the helicopter. It wasn't just Phil Coulson, but some faces that Tony Stark didn't know. JARVIS opens the door for them and directs them to me. Seeing this situation, Tony stood up and spoke. Okay, sir. JARVIS was instructed to open the gate immediately. And this time, not only Phil Coulson, but also Nick Fury, even Natasha Romanoff and some other agents, came together. After entering the gate, under the guidance of JARVIS, they quickly came to the location of the restaurant with a huge amounts of boxes. When Nick Fury and others came in, they glanced at Harvey Ambaraka, who was having an elegant meal. Tony Stark, Howard's son. I didn't expect that you would think of your father one day, and you might leave some relics behind. Nick Fury glanced at Natasha Romanoff, then came to Tony Stark himself, and spoke. It sounds like you know what my father's relics mean? At the moment they officially met, Tony Stark heard what Nick Fury said, and said. Definitely, because your father was once a super genius. And worked closely with the military and with us, S.H.I.E.L.D. So his relics became a military secret and have been kept by us, S.H.I.E.L.D. I wanted to find an opportunity to give it to you, and have a good chat with you to see if you can find something from it. I never thought that you would think of it on your own initiative. Sure enough, the tiger father has no dogs. Nick Fury at the moment met officially, and the words were no longer kept hidden like in video communication, but spoken directly. There is no need for these compliments, just give me my father's relics. Tony Stark saw some changes in Nick Fury's attitude, his eyes flashed and he didn't intend to talk too much, and said directly. I can definitely leave it to you, but you have to study it under the supervision of our S.H.I.E.L.D. Nick Fury didn't refuse when he heard the words, but just made his own request. Just now, you didn't have the attitude you have now. Why do you mean now that if I drive you out, I won't get my father's relics? Tony Stark raised his eyebrows upon hearing this. Tony Stark, I don't want to do this, but you have to understand that we also have difficulties. We need to ensure that what you discover next will not be leaked. Nick Fury said when he heard the words. As soon as Nick Fury said this, there were some irritating clicks from the side. Send someone to watch, and send this crazy woman to guard me. Is this what you S.H.I.E.L.D. said you didn't mean to me? While eating the food, Harvey looked at Natasha Romanoff, who was standing 5 meters away from him, and wondered. Harvey Ambaraka, we don't want it either, but we judge you to be one of the insiders. And your property may pose some threat to our S.H.I.E.L.D. So we need to make sure that you will not leak the secrets, and ask you to sign an agreement with us. When your property needs to be transferred in a large amount in the future, it needs to go through our review. As long as you sign this, we can let you go at any time. Nick Fury turned around when he heard the words, looked at Harvey and said. My money needs to be monitored by you in the future, so I can leave? Shall I also thank you for your generosity? Harvey also laughed when he heard this. Harvey Ambaraka, you understand the dark web, and your wealth may pose a threat to us. So for you and me not to interfere with each other, this is the work we must do. Natasha Romanoff stared at Harvey Ambaraka and spoke. What if I don't agree? Harvey asked back. I hope you don't make it difficult for us, otherwise we can only use other methods to get you to agree. Natasha Romanoff immediately pulled out a gun upon hearing the words, and said with a serious face. If the verbal negotiations are unsuccessful, are you planning to use force? Harvey's smile disappeared, his eyes became calm, and his words became cold. When the words fell, many agents saw the figure of Harvey Ambaraka disappearing directly in place. Now you might as well tell me, if I don't agree, what do you think, how? Harvey held Natasha Romanoff's neck with his left hand, raised it in the air, and said in a cold voice. Harvey's right hand grabbed it, and Natasha Romanoff's arm holding the pistol snapped off with a snap. The huge amounts of pain caused Natasha Romanoff to scream out, sweating wildly. With the exception of Phil Coulson, the other agents immediately pulled out their guns and pointed them at Harvey Ambaraka. But in an instant, there was a click sound all over the dining hall, and all the pistols were turned into powder, scattered all over the ground, and their hands holding the guns were directly twisted off. The severe pain caused the other agents and Nick Fury to groan, their eyes filled with horror. Mr. Harvey Ambaraka, please stop. Seeing this scene, Phil Coulson said hastily. It was found that the verbal negotiation was unsuccessful and planned to use force. Now that you find that force is not feasible, you plan to negotiate with words again? Harvey's movements did not stop, and with a flick of his hand, Natasha Romanoff's body flew out like a rag and hit the wall heavily. With a bang, a shocking crack appeared. Pfft! The impact directly caused Natasha Romanoff's internal organs to churn, severe pain came, and he couldn't help but spit out a big mouthful of blood. Woo! Natasha Romanoff felt as if all the bones in her body were split, it was difficult to move, and she let out some whines. Is it painful? You came to test me for the first time, and even shot me with a gun, forcing me to make a move, to see if I would show extraordinary strength. Want to draw me into your Avengers, if anything? Could it be that your stupid head has never thought about it, if I really have power? Because you shot me on purpose, might I just kill you? Harvey directly crossed more than 10 meters and came directly in front of Natasha Romanoff, looking down at Natasha Romanoff's distorted face because of the pain. His eyes were indifferent, as if looking at a dispensable ant. At this moment, in the eyes of everyone, Harvey seemed to be a lawless and terrifying demon, and the words he said made the people present feel cold and bone-chilling. Tony Stark knew Harvey Ambaraka was pretty scary. Because Harvey Ambaraka just helped him heal, which made his physical fitness greatly improved. And that method is only what Harvey Ambaraka calls a small method. But now after seeing it with his own eyes, Tony Stark realized just how terrifying Harvey Ambaraka was. This is not something humans can deal with ordinary ordnance. Even if he puts on the steel armor, he is probably just a toy in front of Harvey Ambaraka. Harvey Ambaraka, speak up if you have something to say. Nick Fury endured the severe pain, raised his still intact left hand, and spoke in a cowardly manner. Do you have something to say? You want to say that Blue Star may encounter aliens in the future. This Natasha Romanoff is a genetically modified old woman, one of the few better talents in Blue Star's constitution. If she dies, is it a loss for launching? Let's not talk about the death of a piece of garbage like her, and it won't affect her after all. What does your loss have to do with me? Harvey sat directly on the back of the dying Natasha Romanoff, watching Nick Fury speak calmly. Nick Fury was directly broken and fell silent. Didn't I tell you just now, if I can't offend you, I can't hide from you. Originally, you made me unhappy, but if you let me scold me a few times, it will be equal. As long as you don't bother me, I don't bother to talk to you. But now it seems that your stupid arrogance seems to make you very dissatisfied with this, and you want to use power to suppress me. Seeing Nick Fury's silence, Harvey said indifferently. Nick Fury found it impossible to restrain Harvey Ambaraka morally, and he didn't know what to do for a while. It was indeed because of his arrogance that he thought that Harvey Ambaraka, a young Asian rich man, could sign a contract, and then they would live in peace. But I never thought that Harvey Ambaraka dared to threaten them, not only money. I advise you to give up the thoughts in your heart, or I will crush your bones one by one, so that you can experience what pain is. Harvey looked at Nick Fury's gaze without averting it, but suddenly issued a warning. This warning made Natasha Romanoff's movement of touching her thigh stop suddenly, and some despair appeared in her beautiful eyes. This man is simply a demon, powerful and cruel. Ask for votes, this is really important to me, please everyone. Episode 36. No, next time. Mr. Harvey Ambaraka, it's my fault that I failed to convey to my colleagues your dislike of our shield. I hereby ask you to give us another chance. Phil Coulson raised his hands and said cautiously, unknowingly already wearing the honorific title. When he talked with Harvey Ambaraka earlier, the other party expressed his dislike for S.H.I.E.L.D. It also made him understand that no matter whether Harvey Ambaraka has super ability or not, he will not join the Avengers' plan. At that time, he was also very upset when he heard it, so he didn't choose to convey it back to S.H.I.E.L.D., but now that he thinks about it, he should convey it. That way, Chief Fury knew in advance, maybe he wouldn't feel so unhappy when he was scolded just now, and it turned into a disaster now. You are smarter, you didn't point a gun at me just now. But you should understand that with such a cleverness alone, you don't have the capital to negotiate with me. Harvey was a little surprised to see that the gun on Phil Coulson's waist was still there, but his expression remained unchanged, and he said indifferently. I know, so this is my request, I beg you to have a lot of adults, and give us another chance. Please spare Agent Natasha Romanoff, she was seriously injured at the moment and was on the verge of death, and she has paid for the offense she caused you. We will never offend you again in the future, and I hereby promise you with my head. Phil Coulson shook his head quickly when he heard the words, and humbly uttered requests, pleases, and promises, one after another. Harvey Ambaraka, I beg you too, please don't kill me here. Tony Stark also opened his mouth at this time, with some discussion in his words. He also didn't know whether his persuasion would be useful in the face of Harvey Ambaraka, who was obviously a little angry at the moment. But if some lives are caused by him, it will cause some troubles later. Phil Coulson, I don't want your head, but next time, if one of you S.H.I.E.L.D. wants to shoot me, just come to me with the head of the person who wants to attack me. Otherwise, you will know the consequences yourself. Harvey glanced at Tony Stark after hearing the words, then looked at Phil Coulson and said indifferently. Must. Phil Coulson felt the killing intent in Harvey's words, his eyes trembled, and he nodded quickly. I only give you this one chance. Nick Fury, I know what you're leaning on. You don't have to expect Captain Marvel to come back and help you. That woman can't help you, and she can't help me either. Harvey stood up and looked at Nick Fury, warning. Nick Fury's eyes narrowed when he heard Harvey mention the woman. The scene just now had already let him know that with human military power, there might be nothing he could do about this devil like Harvey Ambaraka. In Nick Fury's mind, he already had the idea of asking Captain Marvel to help him once he got himself out of danger. Because Harvey Ambaraka is a very unstable factor for Blue Star. In particular, this unstable factor is still very difficult for their shield. He has to find a way to solve this factor. It's just that when Nick Fury heard that Harvey Ambaraka not only mentioned the woman, but even directly mentioned the name of Captain Marvel. This immediately dispelled all the thoughts and plans in Nick Fury's mind. Thank you, Mr. Harvey Ambaraka, for your kindness. Phil Coulson bravely came behind Harvey Ambaraka, hugged Natasha Romanoff, and said gratefully. Seeing Phil Coulson's actions, Tony Stark felt a little admiration in his heart. Phil Coulson really has kindness. In this situation, he dared to take the initiative to approach Harvey Ambaraka. There is only one chance, and next time you should know what to do. After hearing this, Harvey glanced at Natasha Romanoff, who was showing fearful eyes to himself, then looked at Phil Coulson, and said. I remember, even if I forget anything, I will never forget this. Phil Coulson nodded upon hearing this, and said seriously. In fact, Phil Coulson wanted to come alone to bring Howard's relics this time. Although Harvey Ambaraka threatened them, he had a detailed chat with Harvey Ambaraka. So Phil Coulson clearly knew that although Harvey Ambaraka hated them, he was not ready to fight them. Leaving aside the fact that Harvey Ambaraka may possess super abilities. If Harvey Ambaraka really wanted to hire mercenaries on the dark web to deal with them, there was no need to say it directly, and he could do it secretly. When they want to investigate, they may not even have the opportunity to investigate. But in the video communication just now, Harvey Ambaraka said it specifically, which was obviously a warning. As long as they don't mess with Harvey Ambaraka, the two of them belong to each other. It's just that Chief Fury feels that Harvey Ambaraka, a rich Asian man with no super abilities, is acting so arrogantly. They felt that it was necessary to warn Harvey Ambaraka when they came to see Tony Stark, so they brought many people together. So much so that the situation turned into a horrible situation where they almost all died here. Get out. Harvey glanced at Nick Fury and other agents, and said coldly. After getting the word to leave, Phil Coulson hugged Natasha Romanoff, Nick Fury, and other agents all left in despair. They didn't even dare to monitor Tony Stark to complete the study of the notes when they were stubborn. I will continue to eat, you can start researching. The coldness on Harvey's face melted like winter snow, and he spoke. Harvey Ambaraka, is the Captain Marvel you mentioned just now very strong? Tony Stark thought about it, and then asked some gossip. Well, very strong. Harvey responded while eating. Stronger than you? Tony Stark heard Harvey praise a woman for being strong with almost no hesitation, and the fire of gossip ignited in his heart. Although I don't want to admit it, she is indeed stronger than me now. Harvey nodded again upon hearing this. JARVIS, are they gone? Tony Stark opened his mouth when he heard that, and asked quickly. The woman named Natasha Romanoff was badly injured, so they moved very quickly. JARVIS heard the words and released the projection, and the helicopter outside was starting to rotate. Fortunately, Harvey Ambaraka was scaring them just now. Tony Stark saw the projection and knew that the other party couldn't eavesdrop. He was a little thankful and continued to ask. It's a fact that Captain Marvel is better than me now, but it's also a fact that I can't help it. Seeing Tony Stark's appearance for fear of Nick Fury's hearing, Harvey was a little amused, and said. Captain Marvel is powerful, but his ability is relatively simple. As long as he escapes into the void, it is impossible for Captain Marvel to find him. So Harvey is most afraid of Captain Marvel, not to mention fear. Compared with Captain Marvel, who has a powerful ability but a single ability, Odin and Ancient One may be more likely to cause him more trouble. The Aesir Protoss have gods who can directly monitor the 9 realms, and can overlook Blue Star at any time. Once provoked, it will bring him great trouble. Ancient One can directly see through the past and the future, and also controls strange magic. So before the strength is not strong enough, Harvey doesn't want to face God King Odin and Ancient One. Although I don't quite understand it, since you have the confidence to protect yourself, it's fine. Tony Stark felt relieved when he heard that, and spoke. Harvey saw Tony Stark's attitude of being on his side, and didn't say anything. Episode 37. Tony's request. Tony Stark saw that Harvey Ambaraka didn't speak, but continued to eat. But Harvey Ambaraka, how strong are you? Can mushroom eggs do anything to you? In the end, Tony Stark still couldn't help asking out of curiosity. With the current human technology, I can't do anything to me. Harvey said casually. In the past few months, he has not been idle, maintaining an average rate of 6 evolutions per month, and he has evolved 283 times. His void skin has evolved 64 times. Even if he is located in the lowest part of the deep sea of Blue Star, facing the terrifying and heavy water pressure, it is not considered a harsh environment for him now. He can also be as comfortable as swimming in it. However, in the face of the mushroom egg explosion, if he took it head-on, he might be injured. Therefore, as long as he avoids the power brought by the initial explosion of the mushroom egg and the subsequent radiation brought by the mushroom egg, even if he does not leave, his body will naturally evolve the ability to be immune to radiation in a very short time, and then move freely under the radiation of mushroom eggs. This is the frightening thing about the void: even if you are injured and in a harsh environment, as long as you don't die, you can evolve the ability needed to adapt to all harsh environments in a short period of time. If I become an existence similar to you, can I also reach your current state? Tony Stark asked with surprise in his eyes when he heard this. It's impossible at first, but it just takes some time. You can also have a nearly eternal lifespan, a power that no one can match. Harvey knew that Tony Stark had moved when he heard the words, nodded slightly, and gave Tony Stark a clear answer. The void creature itself is the most powerful weapon, and with the evolved ability, it will eventually become very powerful. The difference between different void creatures is nothing more than the requirements and difficulty of evolution. Tony Stark saw the power displayed by Harvey Ambaraka, and he couldn't help showing some enthusiasm when he heard these eyes. No one can match. What about the gods? It's just that Tony Stark reacted quickly and asked with some doubts. Seeing the power of Harvey Ambaraka, Tony Stark wouldn't be surprised even if a god came before him now. Gods can be understood as creatures or aliens who are born with a long lifespan and have mastered stronger power. Because their strength is beyond human cognition, and the lifespan of human beings is only 100 years. So humans regard them as gods, and certain things they do are regarded as miracles. Harvey said calmly. Human beings only have a short lifespan of 100 years, which sounds really cruel. Hearing Harvey Ambaraka's understated tone, Tony Stark thought for a moment and smiled wryly. Compared with those aliens, human beings are only a few hundred years old. Throughout the long river of history, there are many amazing and brilliant people among human beings. They have left a legacy that can be sung for a long time at a young age, but as they grow older, their physical functions inevitably begin to decline. The brain also becomes dull, and I don't have more time and energy to discover things in the world that I haven't discovered. In the end, they are just a blip in history. If they have a longer lifespan, combining geniuses from all ages, the current scientific and technological civilization of mankind should be more advanced and developed. Harvey's eyes flickered when he heard this, and he said slowly. Lifespan is an unavoidable problem for human beings, so countless human beings long for a longer lifespan. Desire to have more time to develop their talents. Longing for more time, allowing myself to witness the future I have imagined. Desire to have more time to witness scenes and deeds that I have never dared to imagine. Harvey himself has a longer lifespan, so he now has the ability to witness the future with his own eyes. So he won't reject what makes him, maybe he will be regarded as a different kind by others. But Harvey is very clear about human psychology: everyone scolds the alien, and everyone desires to be the alien. Those who feel that having a long lifespan is useless or considered a curse simply because they don't have the power to do whatever they want except for a long lifespan. If there are such a long time, it will bring countless wonderful things. Tony Stark was also greatly shocked when he heard Harvey Ambaraka's words. Harvey Ambaraka has power beyond his cognition, so the position he stands in and the way he looks at the world are completely different from his own. He was threatened by Nick Fury, he was angry but couldn't fight back. Because Nick Fury represents America's military. But Harvey Ambaraka faced the threat of Nick Fury and directly countered with thunder. If it wasn't for the kindness of Harvey Ambaraka, all the people in SHIELD would have died here just now. Harvey Ambaraka showed the power he saw and let Tony Stark understand that no matter how he improved the iron armor, it would be difficult to match it. Because Harvey Ambaraka revealed a key piece of news to him just now. That is, if he becomes an existence similar to Harvey Ambaraka, his power will become stronger and stronger over time. Then Harvey Ambaraka, who created him, must also have such an ability, even more terrifying and powerful. Because Harvey Ambaraka said that even if he became a similar existence to Harvey Ambaraka, he would not be able to catch up with Harvey Ambaraka. Although Harvey Ambaraka said it casually at the time, he did not forget what Harvey Ambaraka said. Countless people are now longing for the opportunity to obtain a longer lifespan and greater strength, which is placed in front of them. It is undoubtedly extremely stupid and ignorant to worry about what others think of you. Harvey Ambaraka, I know I don't have enough strength and qualifications to ask you anything. So this is my request. Tony Stark thought of this, his eyes flashed with firmness, he looked at Harvey Ambaraka and said. You don't have to be so self-deprecating, your mind is very good. And we are not a boss-subordinate relationship, so you don't have to be so cautious. Let's listen to your request, I'll think about it. Harvey looked at the determined Tony Stark upon hearing this, and said. It's only now that I really realize that having power and having power without it are completely different concepts. I want to ask you to let me become a similar existence to you, to have a longer lifespan and stronger power. Tony Stark said seriously when he heard what Harvey Ambaraka said. Miss Pepper, don't you talk to her? Didn't you just say that you haven't told her these things? Harvey Ambaraka knew that Tony Stark was mentally prepared after hearing the words, but he still didn't agree immediately but asked back. She'll understand, and that's why I know I've acted greedily and maybe even brazenly. But even so, I want to say that there is one more thing I want to ask you. If Pepper thinks it through clearly, it doesn't matter even if the power you give her is not comprehensive. Please let her have a longer lifespan. Tony heard the words and said. Women's desire for eternal youth is stronger than men's. So Tony knew that as long as he became younger and told Pepper the secret of becoming younger, he wanted to convince Pepper that it would not be difficult for her to understand and accept. Whether Harvey Ambaraka is willing to agree to his request is an unknown. Episode 38. The Greatness of the Void. Harvey clearly knew that it made Tony Stark feel younger and stronger physically. It won't be long before you ask yourself and aspire to be something like yourself. Once you become an existence similar to me, because your identity is different from mine, you will inevitably be discovered by others and regarded as a different kind. This is your previous scruples, are you really sure now, have you thought it through? Now this opportunity came before Harvey, he mused for a moment, and said. Being able to have a longer lifespan to develop one's own talents and discover things that have never been understood. I believe this kind of opportunity is something that countless people dream of. It's just that I was too dull before, and I didn't realize how mediocre my thoughts are. But now I understand. Tony Stark looked at his palm and said. Since you have made up your mind, I can promise you. But before that, let me introduce myself formally. I come from the void, and the power I possess also comes from the void. Harvey smiled on his face when he heard this, and said. Tony Stark is not surprised that Harvey Ambaraka is not a human being, because the knowledge Harvey Ambaraka knows is obviously beyond the scope of Blue Star superpowers. And Harvey Ambaraka's thinking concept is also the same. It is impossible to restrain Harvey Ambaraka with morality. It's just that when Tony Stark heard about the void, his eyes shrank. That Death God came from the void like you? It was because of knowing the existence of Death God that Tony Stark was exposed to the gate of the new world. Death God is just an identity for my convenience. Harvey thought about it with a flash of his eyes when he heard the words, and decided to speak out. If it is a compatriot, Tony Stark will definitely spend money to find Death God and hope to chat with him as a compatriot. According to Tony Stark's intelligence, it would not be difficult to detect some clues by then, why not just say it now? I didn't intend to offend before. Hearing these words, Tony Stark's brain turned quickly, thinking of how arrogant he was to Harvey Ambaraka before, he broke out in a cold sweat. You don't have to be afraid after you know my identity. I don't pay much attention to etiquette, but I have a rule. I will treat others with the same attitude as others treat me. As long as you don't think of becoming my enemy, I won't hurt you. Seeing that Tony Stark was terrified and sweating profusely, Harvey comforted him. Tony Stark thought about it after hearing what he said, and indeed he didn't care about offending Harvey Ambaraka before, and he felt relieved. You might as well say that Death God is your kindred, but in the end you are Death God. Then I dragged you to see my iron armor, I can't be a joker anymore. But Tony Stark complained, thinking of the way he had been doing. That's something I didn't think about, but I didn't think about you being the Joker that way. On the contrary, I think you are a genius, able to create steel armor with your own wisdom. Although the steel armor still has some flaws, as long as elements can be created to replace palladium. In a sense, it is also a cross-age product that can give other people a certain degree of extraordinary power and bring about completely different changes to human beings. Harvey Ambaraka stopped eating when he heard that, thought about it seriously, and said. Leave that aside, I know that you come from the void, so how can I become a similar existence to you? Tony Stark froze for a moment when he heard these compliments, and changed the subject pretending not to care. Tony Stark, if you want to become an existence similar to me, you must believe in the void and join the void. Seeing the unstoppable smile and pride on Tony Stark's face, Harvey didn't say anything, but continued following the topic. Tony Stark said, "Believe in the void, join the void? What is the void, a place, an organization, or a manifestation of some kind of will?" Tony Stark was confused when he heard about faith and joining. When Tony Stark asked, the voice of the system sounded in Harvey's mind. "It is found that a new creature intends to contact the void. Please confirm with the host to let the other party understand what the void is, and change the life essence of the other party." The void can be understood as a certain place, a certain will, a certain race, a certain dimension. Harvey didn't pay attention to the voice for a while, but explained to Tony Stark. "So that means that if I join the void, I will no longer be a human?" Tony Stark asked thoughtfully after hearing this. "You can understand it that way. After all, human beings don't have a long lifespan. The explanation is a bit difficult to understand. I will let you see it and you will understand. After seeing it, you are really making a decision whether to believe in the void." Harvey nodded slightly when he heard the words, and said, "Let me see it? What should I do?" Tony Stark was also a little moved when he heard the words, but he didn't know what to do. "You'll know," Harvey said with a smile when he heard the words, and then confirmed the system's request. It was at the moment when Harvey agreed, Tony Stark's eyes became lifeless, and his consciousness seemed to wander away at this moment. And Tony Stark felt that he had come to the vast galaxy of the universe. At this time, a huge amount of energy black hole appeared in the surge of the galaxy, and the color of the light monster Luli was extremely dazzling. Tony Stark has never seen this scene with his own eyes in reality, and has only seen such magical scenes in movies. At this moment, Tony Stark noticed that the universe was trembling. This phenomenon was very strange, but he actually saw that the surrounding environment was twisting and trembling, as if something terrifying was about to come out of the black hole of energy. When Tony Stark noticed this, his whole body froze, unable to move at all, as if every cell in his body was in fear. Tony Stark has never experienced this feeling. He watched the void of the universe begin to twist. An unimaginably huge, purple-skinned mantis-like monster emerges from an energy black hole. It wasn't the whole body, just a part of it, too big for Tony Stark to comprehend. In front of the huge size of this monster, the stars in the universe have become smaller at this moment. All the celestial bodies in the universe are small in front of this monster, not to mention Tony Stark himself. He now feels like a star dust in the sky full of stars. The monster finally turned into a figure, which was clearly far away, but Tony Stark could see it clearly for some reason. And when Tony Stark saw this figure from behind, his heart was filled with turmoil. He was very familiar with this figure. It was the Harvey Ambaraka he had seen. It's just that this Harvey Ambaraka is a little different from what he came into contact with. This Harvey Ambaraka walks in the galaxy with his hands behind his back, and has a sense of loneliness that is invincible in the universe. At the same time, Tony saw other huge, unimaginable monsters, besides the mantis-like monster. He saw a figure as big as a galaxy wearing a gold mask and a white cloak, stepping down into the void and disappearing without a trace. He saw a terrifying monster covered in barbs that was as huge as a galaxy, swallowing a fixed star in one gulp. He saw a vast star with huge amounts of purple. If you look carefully, it is a big purple eye, and that purple eye is observing everything in the universe in the dark. He saw monsters digging out countless terrifying tunnels directly in the void, and held unknown monsters that shook the universe. He also saw a huge humanoid creature wearing purple armor on its head, seeming to be overlooking the long river of time in the universe. Every different creature in the void is far beyond Tony Stark's cognition world, making him speechless in shock. And these monsters all turned into the same figure in the end. At the moment Tony Stark felt his own smallness, the greatness of the void, and what the will of the void was. Seeking recommendation, seeking further study, seeking investment. Episode 39. Welcome to the void. Just as Tony Stark was shocked, his body also changed at this moment, and Purple's void power was changing the essence of his life. The creature that detected the host's coercion is Tony Stark. It has a higher fate and rewards 100,000 void energy. The more times Tony Stark evolves in the future, the more void energy will be rewarded to the host. The host successfully persuaded the first creature to join the void, and the selection of the second hero template is open. Please choose the time to choose the host. Hearing that the hero template was activated, Harvey smiled from the bottom of his heart. As long as he can obtain different hero templates, his strength will undergo a qualitative leap. But now is obviously not the time to choose, so Harvey is not in a hurry. Meanwhile, Kamartaj, Ancient One, looked at the future of this universe with a gloomy face. She could see the future of the universe before, but since about half a year ago. For a long time, I don't know what happened, and the future of the universe is shrouded in some mysterious darkness. This is obviously some kind of bad omen, so she has been looking for where the source came from, but she has not found anything for more than half a year. You can only see the entire universe, shrouded in a dark star as huge as a galaxy. To know that she can't see through the long river of time, this kind of thing can't even be done by Dormammu. This portends that something immeasurable is happening in this universe. Ancient One wants to investigate and stop, but can't do anything. Stephen Strange. I hope you can stop it in the future. Ancient One could only pin its hopes on future disciples with higher abilities than itself, and whispered with some prayers. No matter what happens in the future, she must also wait for the arrival of the future Supreme Mage, Stephen Strange. I don't know how long time has passed, when Tony Stark came back to his senses. Tony Stark, do you understand what the void is? Harvey saw Tony Stark open his eyes and smile. Tony Stark looked at the friendly Harvey Ambaraka in front of him, feeling a little unreal. Although I still don't understand it very well, I know the greatness of the void. But Tony Stark nodded and spoke. Welcome to the void. When Harvey heard this response, a sincere smile appeared on his face, and he stretched out his hand. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Hearing this, Tony Stark paused and stretched out his hand, saying gratefully. Seeing those monsters incarnated by Harvey Ambaraka, Tony Stark now faced this opportunity with nothing but awe and gratitude in his heart. Although Harvey Ambaraka says the void is a place, a race, a dimension. But after seeing the scene just now, Tony Stark understands that Harvey Ambaraka is the void originally. The Harvey Ambaraka in front of him will definitely become the most terrifying will and existence in the void in the future. His thinking was indeed correct. No matter how he improved his steel armor, he still couldn't be an enemy of Harvey Ambaraka. Joining the void will be possible and become the most correct decision in my life. He didn't dare to imagine what it would be like to be an enemy of Harvey Ambaraka, nor would he want to be an enemy of Harvey Ambaraka. The current Harvey Ambaraka has not yet become invincible in the universe. However, he has fully understood why Harvey Ambaraka said earlier that he could not reach the height of Harvey Ambaraka. It's just a handy job. Now that you have joined the void, let me tell you what the nature of the void is. The essence of the void is survival, evolution, and adaptation. You now have the ability to evolve by devouring creatures and matter. As long as you constantly devour and evolve, your strength will exceed your imagination. Take a good look at you who are still weak now. It won't be long before your mentality will change with your strength. Harvey let go of his hand and watched as Tony Stark began to explain something. Didn't you say that was the price? Tony Stark asked in surprise when he heard that evolution required eating. That is indeed the price, because it is not only food that is swallowed, living things can also be swallowed. And devour some more powerful creatures, you will get faster and stronger evolution. So you have to remember, don't be swayed by that hunger, and become a monster that has no reason and only knows how to devour and evolve. If you are devoured by hunger, I will kill you myself if you make too much trouble. I hope I don't see you like that. Harvey exhorted seriously after hearing the words. Okay, I'll be careful. Hearing these exhortations and warnings, Tony Stark shuddered and nodded. As soon as these words were spoken, Tony Stark felt a sense of hunger in his body. This hunger came from the instinct of the body, and it didn't make him feel powerless. Tony Stark immediately looked at the various foods placed on the table. At the moment when the mind was highly concentrated, Tony Stark found that the surface of these foods had energy of more or less different colors. Tony Stark found that the world in front of him had changed, and looked back at Harvey Ambaraka. However, he didn't see any energy emanating from Harvey Ambaraka, and he didn't know whether it was because the gap in strength was too far or Harvey Ambaraka hid it too well. But Tony Stark didn't care, and immediately picked up the food and ate it. In the past, these foods were just delicious and filling, but eating them now made Tony Stark feel a warm current filling his body. It's just that Tony Stark ate more than a dozen dishes in a row within 2 minutes, which was far more than he had before. Tony Stark's body also began to undergo some changes, his brown hair became more colorful, and his appearance began to look younger. System, in which direction will Tony Stark evolve? Harvey watched Tony Stark with interest. Other creatures that join the void, unlike the host, do not have a hero template. So other creatures will only evolve the various abilities of the body at first, and it is unknown what they will evolve to in the end. The system usually rarely responds, but it still answers this question. That is to say, they need to evolve and learn to master certain abilities on their own before they can become truly powerful? Harvey asked thoughtfully after hearing the words, but the system did not give an answer to Harvey's question. It's just that Harvey thought about the hero template and the origin of the hero, and probably understood the principle. He can directly get the hero template, master certain abilities, and a clear evolution route. Those like Tony Stark who don't have a hero template can only rely on themselves to evolve and explore. But as long as Tony Stark is not swallowed by desire and still maintains his sanity, with a long lifespan and a body that will definitely be able to travel the universe in the future, it is not difficult for Tony Stark to learn and master more extraordinary abilities. It's just that if you want to gain powerful power, you need more time and energy. Even if there is no hero template, it is already a great gift to be able to join the void to obtain a terrifying evolutionary ability and a long lifespan. Episode 40. Reasons to make money. Tony Stark ate a lot of food, and the more he ate, the stronger the power that came from his body. This feeling was intoxicating, but suddenly Tony Stark realized that all the food had been eaten. I remember that in order to invite you, I prepared a lunch for at least 100 people. Where's my so much food? Tony Stark froze for a moment. What do you think I've been doing just now? Facing this question, Harvey patted his still flat stomach and asked back. JARVIS, help me prepare more food, at least 400 people. Today, I'm hosting Harvey Ambaraka. Tony Stark didn't mind when he knew the food was finished, and said with a smile. He will keep in mind Harvey Ambaraka's reminder to him that devouring creatures will evolve faster, but he will definitely not try, even if the evolution rate is slower. Anyway, the current him does not only have a lifespan of only 100 years as a human being. He has a lot of time for himself to become stronger, do what he likes, and give full play to his talents. Okay sir, I'll get ready now. JARVIS immediately agreed after receiving the instructions. Although on the first day of the new year, it would be difficult to find a chef to cook for yourself, let alone cook so much at one time, but as long as you give more money, you can definitely find someone. Harvey Ambaraka, can you share with me some evolutionary insights? Immediately, Tony Stark looked at Harvey and asked. To be honest, I can't be your reference, because you are different from me. You may not understand this now, but you will understand it soon. This difference does not mean that you have certain defects, you also have a long lifespan. It's just what ability you can master, and how powerful it is. I don't know either. It's all up to you to find out with time. When Harvey heard that Tony was going to treat him to a big meal, he originally had no intention of leaving immediately, so he sat down on the sofa and spoke. I understand that you can't be a reference. I just want you to tell me something. Is there anyone else joining the void besides me? Let me communicate with other people, maybe it can speed up my. Tony Stark walked towards the sofa while talking. It's just that when Tony Stark sat down, he didn't pay attention to controlling his strength. Tony Stark's body directly collapsed the sofa, and his body sank directly into it. F***K. Tony Stark let out a loud cry. He didn't feel the pain, he just felt weird. Don't make a fuss, you are just the beginning. You have to learn to master your own power, so you do research every day. You have to set aside time to control your own power, otherwise you will cause some damage if you are not careful. As for companions, besides you, no other creatures have joined the void to become your companions. However, there will be more and more in the future. At that time, you can share your own experience on your own evolutionary path. Harvey looked at Tony Stark, who was yelling, and said slowly. So that means I'm the first? Tony Stark struggled and stood up from the sofa. Hearing the news, he pointed to his face and asked in disbelief. Harvey nodded. Thank you for your appreciation, Harvey Ambaraka. Tony Stark understood after hearing this, and said gratefully again. Because Harvey Ambaraka said that some geniuses who have left some pen and ink in the long river of history were unable to further develop their talents due to life restrictions. So that means that in the eyes of Harvey Ambaraka, he meets the criteria of a genius who left history. Although there is no affirmation and appreciation from Harvey Ambaraka, he also believes that with his own invention, he can also leave a strong mark in history. But after getting this opportunity, it will be different. He can use a longer time to write his own history and stories. Although I gave you this opportunity, you don't have to be too cautious, just chat with me normally. It's normal for you to want to find other people of the same kind to share your evolutionary experience with you. Although I can't be your reference for evolution, I can tell you what food to eat and what to do to speed up your evolution. Harvey said when he heard the words. Then tell me quickly. Tony Stark would have liked to hear a normal chat, and he didn't pretend to be polite anymore. There was no suitable place to sit, so he stood. In Tony Stark's mind, Harvey Ambaraka is the embodiment of the will of the void. Now Harvey Ambaraka didn't know why he stayed in Blue Star, but it gave him the opportunity to directly ask the will of the void. Tony Stark definitely can't miss it. There are two ways to evolve in the void. One is to absorb and devour, constantly evolve, and the other is to adapt to the environment so that you can achieve different evolutions. And the more powerful the creature that turns into food is, the more it can accelerate its own evolution. For example, bulls, bears, tigers, leopards, some big fish in the deep sea, and other powerful animals on the blue star have more life energy. But if you don't want to be targeted by the Conservation Association and cause some trouble, then it's best not to eat those protected animals. It's good to eat beef and pork exclusively. They can also provide good energy for you to evolve. Harvey heard the words and patiently explained. Since he lured Tony Stark into the void, he definitely didn't want Tony Stark to end up as a mindless void creature. Although Tony Stark may become stronger after becoming irrational, but without reason everything is empty. So Harvey Ambaraka also intends to explain clearly to Tony Stark about some important points. No wonder you want to make money. Tony Stark was thoughtful when he heard Harvey's words. According to the amount Harvey Ambaraka ate, if there was no spare money in his pocket, then he could only grab it everywhere. Although it is not impossible to snatch it, if you do that, Harvey Ambaraka's identity will not be hidden so well. Although Harvey Ambaraka was exposed to SHIELD now, but seeing Harvey Ambaraka who looks like a demon, if SHIELD is smarter, it is impossible to dare to expose Harvey Ambaraka. Yeah, I make money so I can eat what I want and enjoy life unobtrusively. Harvey didn't deliberately hide it when he heard the words, and said with a smile. Episode 41. Understanding the New World. Definitely, in addition to eating, there is also the path of adaptive evolution. But if you want to improve your own strength through adaptive evolution, you need to go to a place that makes you feel very uncomfortable and harmful to your body. After staying for a while, your body will automatically evolve the ability to resist. The harsher the environment, the faster the rate of adaptation and evolution. Harvey taught Tony Stark some of the lessons he had learned over the years. He wasn't afraid that Tony Stark would overpower him, so he wouldn't be stingy with these experiences at all. A harsh environment? Like an extremely dry desert? Tony Stark was thoughtful upon hearing this. No, the surface of the desert will only bring you a little discomfort, only to make you not afraid of the heat. But if you want to achieve a deeper level of evolution in the desert, you need to take the initiative to step into the underground of the desert and be directly buried alive by the yellow sand for a period of time. The tremendous pressure that the sand puts on your body will allow you to get a deep level of ability. The same is true for the sea. As long as you can stay for a while, you will be able to evolve the ability to breathe in the sea. However, if you want to step into the deep sea without fear of water pressure, you need to go through some time to adapt to evolution. Harvey shook his head and explained. It sounds like if you want to adapt to evolution, you have to risk your life. Tony Stark originally wanted to do both, but now hearing what Harvey Ambaraka said, his inner thoughts were immediately dispelled. Essentially, it's really a life-threatening. Because adaptive evolution is in an extreme environment, when there is no choice, quickly adapt to the environment and enhance your own survival ability. Definitely, if you want to travel the universe directly with your body, go to various harsh environments, explore the truth, and fight various powerful enemies by the way. Being able to make all the preparations you can expect, and strengthening your originally, can guarantee your survival. Harvey nodded in sympathy when he heard the words, and said slowly. The body travels through the void. Hearing this, Tony Stark recalled in his mind the void creatures as big as stars he saw just now. Just how powerful they are, Tony Stark can't understand. But he knows a truth: if it really evolves to that point, let alone roaming the universe is simply a back garden. The various radiation disasters in the universe, such as gamma rays, are not worth mentioning to that terrifying void creature. And those monsters that have evolved to be unimaginable are all just one of the powers that Harvey Ambaraka has mastered. Don't say that he has evolved to the same level as Harvey Ambaraka. It may take an inestimable amount of time just for him to evolve to the ultimate level of one of the powers Harvey Ambaraka has mastered. Fortunately, his lifespan is not limited to a short 100 years. As long as he lives long enough, one day he will definitely be able to pry into the truth of the void and obtain one of the powers. And as the first one to join the void, Tony Stark felt that he needed to get more evolution before other people joined the void, so that those latecomers would know what a forerunner is. It sounds really exciting. A smile spread across Tony Stark's face. In the previous words, Tony Stark only dared to think that he could rely on the technology he invented to go to the universe. As long as his steel armor is studied in depth, traveling in places near the blue star should not be a dream, but an ideal that can be realized. But going directly to the universe with his physical body was something he never dared to think about in the past. Because even if the universe is put aside, human beings need to breathe this difficult condition. The intense ultraviolet light that is not blocked by the ozone layer can kill him directly, not to mention all kinds of radiation and rays. Don't be too happy too early. Even if you join the void, it doesn't mean you can do whatever you want now. There are also some big shots on the blue star. If you provoke them, it will bring death to you who are still weak. Seeing Tony Stark smile, Harvey reminded. Big shot? That Captain Marvel you were talking about? Tony Stark immediately remembered a name upon hearing this, and asked. That Captain Marvel, at the moment, is helping creatures on various planets in various parts of the universe, so you don't need to worry about it for the time being. The most important thing to pay attention to now is the Supreme Mage Ancient One. She has guarded the blue star for hundreds of years. Because Tony Stark officially joined the Void, he was considered to be on the same side as him, so Harvey also explained more information. Lest Tony Stark commit any foolishness, he ended up bringing in the Supreme Mage Ancient One. Guarding humans for hundreds of years? Is that Supreme Mage Ancient One not a human? Tony Stark asked incredulously upon hearing the words. After all, he had never heard of any human beings who lived for more than 150 years. Now Harvey Ambaraka told himself that it was hundreds of years, which made him feel a little unbelievable. She is a human being, but she has mastered the power of magic and extended her life through some means. Generally, she will not easily interfere with matters on the material level, because she is in charge of the magical world and enemies from all dimensions. Harvey said when he heard the words. I've always thought magic was just a fiction. But now that I have met you and joined the Void, it seems that it is not incomprehensible for someone in the universe to master magic. Tony Stark thought for a moment upon hearing this, and muttered to himself. Let's not talk about the universe, just the blue star has a lot of power that ordinary people can't understand. The current you are only just out of the human category. For the common people, your power will soon exceed common sense. But compared to those who have mastered all kinds of super abilities and magic, you are now an ant with strong self-knowledge at best. Harvey tapped Tony Stark for words. Although I know I'm weak now, at least use people to describe me? Tony Stark heard that the fire in his heart seemed to have been poured with cold water, and instead of questioning Harvey Ambaraka's words, he wanted to correct them. He has lived as a human being for nearly 40 years. Although joining the Void caused huge amounts of changes in his race and the world he came into contact with, even if his life level is different, at least his thoughts are still human. I'm just talking about the power difference, but it's good that you're aware of that. It will allow you to better resist the temptation of desire in the future. Harvey glanced at Tony Stark admiringly upon hearing this, and praised him. How strong is that Supreme Mage Ancient One? Tell me more quickly, and wait for Pepper to join in the future. I'll be able to blow, explain to her. Tony Stark remembered everything Harvey Ambaraka said in his heart, and asked curiously. Now that he has joined the Void and Harvey Ambaraka's camp, it should be regarded as his real access to the extraordinary world that humans cannot. As for the extraordinary world, the information I know is too little. Episode 42. The True and False Gods. Harvey saw Tony Stark eagerly understanding and bragging to Pepper, but he didn't hide it on purpose. Ancient One has mastered countless magics and is the supreme mage of Blue Star. It is a well-known existence in the entire universe. Because of her existence, many enemies dare not mess with Blue Star. If I provoke her, at most it will cause some trouble, but if you provoke her, you will surely die now. So act carefully, at least until you become stronger. Don't think of doing whatever you want. But she didn't live for a few years. So remember one sentence, honestly hold on to the development and don't make too much noise. After she dies, you should have a decent power. Harvey explained the information he knew. Will Supreme Mage Ancient One die? Why? Didn't you say that she survived by some means? Since you can live for hundreds of years, it shouldn't be a problem to live for thousands of years, right? Tony Stark was not happy when he heard the words, but he couldn't understand it. The Supreme Mage Ancient One may become his enemy, but the Supreme Mage Ancient One has guarded the Blue Star for hundreds of years. And Harvey also said that it is also because of the Supreme Mage Ancient One that some foreign enemies in the universe dare not do anything to Blue Star. If this kind of big shot dies, then Blue Star's situation may be in danger. 2017, do you mean that the Supreme Mage Ancient One won't survive 2017, so Blue Star will encounter terrible enemies? Immediately, Tony Stark realized something, looked at Harvey Ambaraka with a solemn face, and asked. If the Supreme Mage Ancient One wants to continue her life, she can indeed continue her life. However, she will die in the next few years. As for the detailed reason, I won't explain. Harvey nodded, seeing how quickly Tony Stark had reacted. There is a way to continue her life, but she died. Does that mean she doesn't want to live anymore? Tony Stark said with a complicated expression when he heard the reason why he couldn't go into details. Well, although she has lived for many years, and has mastered countless magical powers, she is very powerful. However, she is originally still a human being, and special means are required to continue her life. Harvey saw that Tony Stark had a direct insight into this level, so he didn't say anything without telling it. It sounds like that kind of life extension method is not a good method. Then Harvey Ambaraka, can't you let her join the Void? According to her strength, if she joins the Void, she should become a very powerful companion, right? Tony Stark also understood after hearing this. I'd like to do that, but only her death can create a new Supreme Mage, so her death is doomed. Harvey is definitely extremely hopeful in his heart, and he wants to win Ancient One into the Void. The more powerful creatures he draws into the Void, the more Void power he gains. It was only after Stephen Strand witnessed the death of Ancient One that he really embarked on the path of the Supreme Mage, fully displaying his abilities and talents at the magical level. Ancient One Mage can also take this opportunity to truly let go of the responsibilities and fall into a long sleep with peace of mind. The Void is very attractive to creatures who seek power and a longer lifespan. A scientific madman like Tony Stark, including other super ability users, as well as various power-hungry creatures in the universe, it will not be too difficult for him to win over. But for Ancient One, she already has the power, and she can also have the lifespan. So the two best lures are hardly of much use, and certainly see the Void as evil for Ancient One. Therefore, he wants to win over Ancient One, making it very difficult for him to accept joining the Void. This actually made Harvey quite uncomfortable, because Ancient One was like a gold mine for Harvey, but he couldn't find a way to mine the gold mine. Since there is a new Supreme Mage, why will there be a big enemy in 2017? Tony Stark said a little strangely upon hearing that. Just as the words were being asked, Tony Stark thought for a while, and soon realized the problem, with an expression of enlightenment on his face. Just as you think, even if you accept the inheritance of powerful power, power will always grow over time. Seeing that Tony had figured it out, Harvey nodded and said in affirmation. I don't know how far I can grow in 8 years. Tony Stark clenched his fist and said with some expectation and some worry. If Harvey Ambaraka was willing to help, he wouldn't be worried at all. Because he knew how powerful Harvey Ambaraka was. It's just that Harvey Ambaraka is not a blue star, and human morality can't affect Harvey Ambaraka's will and decision at all. Therefore, it is unknown whether Harvey Ambaraka will choose to help or choose to stand by at that time, so he can only rely on himself. I have already told you the experience of evolution. How far you can evolve in the future, you need to explore by yourself. 8 years can be long or short, so don't put too much pressure on yourself. When the enemy really comes, it will not be too late. Seeing Tony Stark's worried look, Harvey could understand it in his heart, so he said some comforting words. But he couldn't say anything like a guarantee. At present, he only has the self-confidence that purple sweet potato essence can't help him at that time. As for whether he can win or not, he has to see how far he can evolve at that time. Well, the big shot you're talking about shouldn't only be the Supreme Mage Ancient One, right? Tony Stark flickered when he heard these eyes, decided to put these things behind him first, and continued to ask. Definitely, except for the Supreme Mage Ancient One and Captain Marvel. There is also Odin, the Lord of the 9 Realms who rules the 9 worlds, including Blue Star. His strength is very strong, and now his subordinates are always monitoring the situation of Blue Star. So even if you join the Void, don't be too flamboyant. Time brings everything you want. Harvey also explained it again when he heard the words. Tony Stark has witnessed the will of the Void, and after being baptized by magic and super ability, he originally thought that his psychological acceptance ability had been greatly improved. The king of God Odin, so there is still Thor? Or Zeus of Olympiad? But Harvey Ambara suddenly popped out the king of God Odin, which really shocked Tony Stark, and said with some uncertainty. It seems that there is nothing wrong with your understanding of ability. Harvey saw that Tony understood the situation directly by analogy, and said with a smile after hearing this. According to what you mean, the gods and the legendary myths on Blue Star are all real, but they all come from the universe? Although Tony Stark was taken aback, he quickly accepted Harvey Ambaraka's confirmation and asked thoughtfully. Yes. Harvey nodded again when he heard the words. Then are their strengths as terrifying as those recorded in the books? Tony Stark got the confirmation and his face became serious. Because human beings are limited by strength, era, and vision. The legendary recorded by humans is naturally exaggerated. However, there are still many true news, which have been passed down as legendary. For example, the abilities they are born with and the artifacts in mythology. Harvey explained briefly. If I hadn't been exposed to the void, I wouldn't have believed that those myths, legendary, could be true. Tony Stark said with some emotion after learning about the general situation. The reason why myths are called myths is because the people, things, and deeds recorded in myths are powers that cannot be imagined by human beings. There are sects and believers who believe in those gods. But to Tony Stark, who used to be science-based, those people were kind of stupid. Because if there really is a god, Blue Star has encountered countless disasters, big and small, in the past so many years, but miracles have never appeared, so it is better to believe in yourself than to believe in God. To put it bluntly, Tony Stark was an atheist before. He believes that those myths are just deeds fabricated by some people, and it is impossible to distinguish the true from the false. But now he understood, because those gods were not real local gods, but aliens who came to Blue Star from the universe. Whether they help human beings does not depend on whether their beliefs are pious enough, but on whether the other party shows kindness and comes to help. At this time, the voice of Jarvis sounded. "Excuse me, sir. 2 whole cow dinners are ready for Mr. Harvey Ambaraka. They are also rushing to make many dishes that will be added later." They sent an inquiry, "Do you want to send the whole cow feast first?" Jarvis also knew that Tony and Harvey Ambaraka were talking about something important, but they had to ask. "Just let them go to the gate, don't let them in." Upon hearing this, Tony Stark glanced at the cracked walls and the blood-stained floor, and said, "Okay, sir." Jarvis also knew that the location of the restaurant on the second floor at the moment was not suitable for others to see, so he didn't ask why. "Harvey Ambaraka, would you mind giving me an all-cow feast?" Immediately, Tony Stark touched his stomach, looked at Harvey Ambaraka, and asked with some embarrassment. Harvey also knew that the current Tony Stark had just tasted the initial stage of being able to increase his own strength by tasting a lot of food. "You said that you were going to treat me to a banquet, and it is absolutely fine for me to eat one less cow." The craving for food is even more fanatical, so Harvey didn't deliberately say that it was my petty words to invite me. Anyway, as long as Tony Stark becomes a foodie, according to Tony Stark's personality, he will have more opportunities to eat and drink in the future. "Thanks." Tony Stark laughed when he heard that. He was already starving. If he hadn't just run out to eat and drink, it would have caused some trouble. He would have just driven out to eat hamburgers and the like. Episode 43. I want you to promise me. Soon, the 2 Allox feasts were delivered to the gate, and the money had already been drawn, so the delivery man left quickly after delivering them. Tony and Harvey each pushed their own large table of food and walked inside. The door was closed immediately after Tony pushed in. Although he is mentally prepared to be regarded as a different kind by others, he has only just joined the void, and it is better to hide for a while if he can hide for a while. Afterwards, Tony Stark didn't care about Harvey Ambaraka anymore. He grabbed the meat with his hands and ate it, and began to feast on it. The weight of a cow is enough for many people to eat, but under Tony Stark's amazing appetite, it is disappearing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Life energy is constantly filling and strengthening Tony Stark's cells. Now that he has just joined the void, his body is still very weak, so every energy can bring him obvious changes. In just 15 minutes, Tony Stark ate up a cow. When Tony Stark finished eating, he felt stronger and stronger in his body, and felt happy physically and mentally. But because of this wolfing down, there was a lot of oil and sauce on the corners of Tony Stark's mouth. When Tony Stark was about to wash his face, he suddenly saw Harvey Ambaraka, who was a few meters away from him, eating elegantly, and almost finished his meal. Most importantly, he found that Harvey Ambaraka's face and clothes were not stained with any grease. "If you don't eat it directly with your hands, how can you eat it as fast as me?" Tony compared himself, and looked at Harvey Ambaraka with a strange look. Habit is second nature. Harvey swallowed the meat in his mouth and said with a smile, "It seems that I have to study hard." Tony Stark looked at himself upon hearing this, and went straight to the bathroom after speaking. Although the etiquette of eating has never been a concern to him. Because most of the guests are entertained by him, as long as his food is not unattractive, no one will say anything about him. Even if it is the same in front of women, they will praise his true temperament or say that he has a good appetite. But this is also a comparison. Although he didn't take a picture of his eating just now, but now think about it compared with Harvey Ambaraka's extremely elegant eating movements, his movements are rude in one word. In the future, when there are more void compatriots, no matter what, he will invite other latecomers to have a meal. When the time comes to enjoy the big feast together, I don't look elegant at all after wolfing it down. Just thinking about it, Tony Stark felt that the picture was a little joyful. So in order not to let others see the joke, he still has to pay attention to these things that should be paid attention to in the future. Harvey didn't care, and continued to eat his own food. And after Tony Stark went into the bathroom and washed his face, he found that his appearance hadn't changed much. If we talk about changes, it means that my eyesight has become better, and I can clearly see that my brown hair has become more lustrous than yesterday, and there is a tendency to return to youth. Compared with Harvey Ambaraka, who helped him to strengthen himself when he was treating him before, these changes are a bit subtle. It's hard for Tony Stark to imagine what kind of strength Harvey Ambaraka has reached now. But thinking of himself in the void scene, it is inevitable that Harvey Ambaraka is strong. He still has a long way to go. The most important thing is that he cannot be swallowed by desire. Tony Stark patted his face, not long after he walked out of the bathroom. Later, more food began to be delivered to the door one after another. The food for hundreds of people was eaten by Tony and Harvey Ambaraka within a few hours. My appetite has never been better. After eating, Tony Stark touched his stomach, lay flat on the ground without any scruples, and said with emotion, "It's time for me to go too. You should discuss with her about Pepper. If she wants, I can give her a chance." Harvey also finished enjoying the feast hosted by Tony Stark, stood up contentedly, and spoke. "Good. After being betrayed by Obadiah Stane, the only people I can trust are Pepper and Jarvis. Having great strength and a long lifespan is a great thing, but a person's eternal life is too lonely. So I hope Pepper can be with me for many more years. So I'll convince her anyway. Harvey Ambaraka, I've said it a few times, but I still want to say it. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. I also thank you for giving Pepper a chance." Tony Stark also stood up from the ground upon hearing the words, and said with a grateful expression, "Understood, please do your best." Harvey's eyes flickered when he heard the words. He nodded slightly in recognition of Tony Stark's words, then turned and left. This visit to Stark Manor not only satiates him with food and drink, but also yields more than he expected. Wait for him to go home and think about it, which hero template to choose is more suitable for him to perform better. After Harvey Ambaraka left, Jarvis scans my current physical condition and compares it with yesterday's me. Tony Stark went to the basement research room, looked at himself in the mirror, and said, "Sir, your current appearance and characteristics are equivalent to you at the age of 28, and there is no disease in your body. And the cells in your whole body have been greatly enhanced, and they are still increasing at a slow speed." After scanning Tony Stark, Jarvis replied immediately, "Where is Pepper now?" Tony Stark said with a smile on his face when he heard the news. "Miss Pepper is resting in her room, playing a tablet game. Miss Pepper said it was a rare day to rest, so I blocked the outside world for her. She was not disturbed in any way." Jarvis spoke after hearing this. "Smart, but wake her up for me now, and let her come to the basement research room. Just say I have something to tell her." Upon hearing the words, Tony Stark first praised Jarvis, and then instructed, "Okay, your instructions have been conveyed for you." Jarvis also complied when he heard the words, and simultaneously conveyed it to Pebwa. When Pepper heard what Jarvis said, he also walked out of the room. "Tony?" When Pepper walked down, the first thing he saw was Tony's back. It's just that she noticed that Tony's back was extremely tall and straight, with a feeling of high spirits. "Pepper, I have something to tell you. And I want you to promise me that you will keep it a secret and never reveal it to anyone else." Hearing this, Tony turned around and looked at Pepper with an extremely serious expression. "I even buy karma." Seeing Tony, who turned around, Pepper looked like a guy in his 20s, and cried out in disbelief. Episode 44. Tony's mission. "Tony, what the hell happened to you? Have you developed genetics?" Pepper rubbed his eyes, walked a few steps in disbelief, and looked carefully at Tony's current appearance, full of surprise in his heart, but a little excited in his words. Because the genetics developed by Tony is very likely to be related to lifespan. As long as it doesn't have too many side effects, it will become a treasure that countless women are eager to pursue. "Shut up." Seeing Pepper's slightly excited look, Tony shouted directly. Pepper trembled when he heard this, and was also taken aback. Because this is the first time Tony looks annoyed and tells himself to shut up. "Pepper, you should have a lot of things you want to ask me. I will tell you everything, but from now on, you will let me do whatever you want with your self-centered talk. But when you meet more people outside in the future, you have to restrain yourself." Tony walked towards Pepper with his hands behind his back, his face serious. Pepper's attitude of talking to himself is okay in front of him, but if it is still like this in front of Harvey Ambaraka, it may leave some bad impressions. "Is this an order?" Seeing Tony hear these words, Pepper wanted to reply as usual, but seeing Tony exuding confidence and majesty, he could only ask in a low voice. "This is not an order, this is a reminder. Because what I tell you next will open up a new world for you. If you continue to be by my side in the future, you will definitely attend some special occasions with me and meet some special people or things. Those people and things will be more special than anything you've ever seen and heard before. Sometimes you may cause disasters that even I can't resist because of some of your self-care behaviors outside. So you have to remember that. Tony walked towards Pepper, step by step, and said, "Is this a marriage proposal?" Pepper had an incredible expression on his face when he heard that the future would be with him. She clearly knew that her relationship with Tony was more than a friend but not a lover. It's just that Tony is a super rich playboy. Although he is close to 40 years old, Tony doesn't need to worry. So she kept waiting when Tony would really calm down, but she didn't expect Tony to say that suddenly. "You can think so." Tony didn't deny it. Pepper originally thought that Tony would find an excuse to evade or deny it like in the past, but he didn't expect that this time, Tony would be so direct. "Okay, you continue to talk and I listen." This made Pepper's mood a little turbulent and said extremely happily, "You asked me before why I suddenly became younger, and I didn't answer you at that time. It's because I didn't think clearly about whether to accept it at the time. But now I can tell you why I became such a secret, including the world that ordinary people in the world cannot touch." Tony sat down on a chair and spoke. Pepper felt a little strange hearing Tony's words, but just nodded to show that he was listening. "I'm young because someone opened me up to a new world. Let me get a long lifespan and stronger strength. I also understand the essence of life, the other side of the world, the vastness of the universe, and the truth and falsehood of gods. And the person who led me into that new world was none other than Harvey Ambaraka." Seeing that Pepper was so obedient, Tony continued talking. "Tony, have you been pyramid schemed?" Pepper was silent for a moment when he heard these words that were not usually mentioned, and then spoke. Tony was not surprised to see Pepper's reaction, knowing that facts speak louder than words, so he didn't speak out to argue. Instead, he lifted his foot directly and landed on the ground. With a sound of bang, the floor was crushed by Tony's foot. "How did you do it?" Seeing the power of Tony's kick, Pepper's beautiful eyes widened. Tony could not be said to be weak in the past, because he often had to invent, so his strength was stronger than ordinary people. But Pepper knew that Tony's body was just that, stronger than normal, but not by much. But now Tony smashed the floor directly with one foot, which obviously couldn't be the power that Tony could have. "This is the power from the void, don't worry, I'll tell you bit by bit." Tony raised Erlang's legs pretending nothing happened, shaking them slightly to dissipate the pain from his feet, and said at the same time. According to his estimate, it would not be difficult for him to step on the cracks in the floor, but he didn't expect to crush the floor with too much force, so that his feet also hurt. It's just that Tony soon felt the pain from the soles of his feet, which was quickly disappearing. This discovery made Tony himself a little surprised, but it was obviously not the time to be surprised. What matters is how he convinces Pepper to believe in the void together and join the void. Mister's physical fitness is at least several times stronger than before, far surpassing common humans. At this time, JARVIS also explained it according to Tony's prior instructions. Pepper heard JARVIS's words, and watched Tony return to his youth and handsomeness. She doesn't understand what the void is, but she understands what she should do now. So Pepper honestly found a chair and sat down. "Before you spy on the void, I believe you will have doubts about the void. Because I was the same before. Before facing the void, I couldn't understand what it means to be void. But now I understand that the void is for evolution and adaptation as well as survival. You may not be able to understand it now." Tony Stark looked at Pepper's honest appearance and began to explain the situation. Just after finishing speaking, Tony saw Pepper's puzzled look, thought for a while, and changed to an easy-to-understand statement. "To put it simply, it allows you to obtain some kind of super ability, and the most important thing is to obtain a lifespan of at least hundreds of thousands of years or even longer. As you can see, I have joined the void, so I gain power and become younger. Pepper, you are a woman, I know you may not yearn for power that much. But let me ask you, do you want to stay young forever?" Tony said that, throwing the question to Pepper. "I want to stay young forever, and no woman doesn't want to. But I still want to ask, what is the price? If you want to obtain super ability or a longer lifespan, there must be a price." Pepper heard the easy-to-understand words, thought for a while, calmed down, and asked. "The price is that the appetite will become very large, and you need to eat a lot of food every day." Tony heard Pepper's words and replied seriously. "Same as Mr. Harvey Ambaraka?" Pepper heard that the appetite would grow, and immediately thought of Harvey Ambaraka. Yes, but this can be said to be a price, and it can also be said that joining is something that evolution requires. If you want to evolve, you have to eat. The more you eat, the more you evolve, the more power you get, and the longer your lifespan. The real price is a psychological test, and you need to resist the temptation of desire. Because of the power of extraordinary, the mentality will change. Just like me now, in the past I would not dare to explain my real thoughts to you because of some insignificant thoughts in my heart, such as fear of making a fool of myself. But it's different now. I have a lifespan of at least 1,000 years or even longer. And I asked Harvey Ambaraka to get you the opportunity to join the void together. I want you to join the void with me now, and we will spend long years together. Hope you won't let my efforts go to waste, Pepper. Tony stared directly at Pepper when he heard this, his words revealed incomparable seriousness. He knew there was only one chance, if Pepper didn't want to. It is hard to say whether Harvey Ambaraka will give another chance in the future. And if Pepper doesn't accept it anyway, then he and Pepper are destined to become people in two worlds. So he also took advantage of this to say what he had always wanted. I really don't yearn for strength that much, but women do have an instinctive pursuit of eternal youth. I also thank you for your willingness to fight for this opportunity for me. But I have a question for you. Pepper felt Tony's hot eyes, and tried to look at each other for a few seconds, and finally looked away shyly, and asked in a low voice. You ask? Tony's heart sank slightly when he heard Pepper's words, but he still suppressed the throbbing in his heart and asked. That is, if I eat so much like Mr. Harvey Ambaraka every day, will I get fat? Pepper heard the words and expressed his own problems. That's it? Tony originally thought that Pepper had other scruples, so he constantly thought about how to solve it. Unexpectedly, Pepper was worried about whether he would gain weight. That's all, an appetite as big as Mr. Harvey Ambaraka's. It's easy to think about gaining weight, okay? Pepper felt Tony's speechless eyes, and seriously argued. I can't give you an accurate answer to this question, but judging from Harvey Ambaraka's situation, these problems can be solved. At least I am envious of his figure. There are still many things I haven't told you, but please tell me the answer now. Are you willing to join the void with me? Have a longer lifespan and explore the other side of the world with me. Tony Stark saw that Pepper didn't show weird eyes, but seriously defended himself, and smiled on his face, sending out a sincere invitation. Yes, but what should I do? Pepper asked in a low voice when he saw Tony, who was more handsome and confident. I'm going to ask. Tony was very happy to hear that and wanted to talk about taking Pepper to see Harvey Ambaraka. It's just that before Tony finished speaking, he saw Pepper's eyes closed tightly, and his body was lying flat in the air because he could even see a little lace in the skirt. But these are not important, the important thing is that Tony found that Pepper's body began to be covered by Purple's energy. The void is really mysterious and great. Seeing this scene, Tony said with some emotion. The person I care about the most is allowed to join the void and explore the other side of the world with him. This kind of tolerance and gift can only be described as great. There is a problem with the system, which prevents comments from appearing directly in the comment area. Episode 45. Void Walker. After only a few minutes, Pepper's body slowly lay on the ground. OMG. When Pepper opened his eyes, his body trembled, he woke up suddenly, and shouted. Pepper, what did you see? Seeing Pepper wake up, Tony asked quickly. I saw one unimaginable behemoth after another. In front of them, I feel that I am too small. It's so small that it's not even as good as an ant. Pepper looked pale and said with awe in his words. Those are all manifestations of the will of the void. It also means that we join the void, and we can reach the ultimate appearance in the future. So you don't have to be afraid. Seeing Pepper, who was covered in cold sweat from the fright, Tony quickly comforted him. Meaning I'll become that giant too? Pepper's face became even paler upon hearing this. You just saw the giants? Hearing these words, Tony asked carefully, with a flash of his eyes. Well, I only saw one horrible monster after another that was bigger than the planet. Although Pepper was a little strange when he heard this, he still nodded. Don't worry, believe me, that may be the most primitive appearance of the ultimate evolution. Using power can change into a human form. When Tony heard Pepper's words, his eyes flickered and his brain was running quickly, and he comforted him. Is there anything to eat? Pepper was frightened at first, but soon the hunger in her stomach made her look at Tony and ask. I've had people prepare it a long time ago, and it should arrive later. And then I have to explain more things to you. You don't have to worry, let alone be afraid. I am here. Tony saw that Pepper was starting to feel hungry too, no surprise. Good. Pepper nodded slightly at the reassuring words. The other side. Harvey Ambaraka drove back to his home. Just now, the system notified me that someone wants to understand and join the void. Harvey knew without thinking that Tony had convinced Pepper, so he agreed. The addition of Pepper only added 5,000 void energy to him, which is a full 20 times difference from when Tony Stark joined. But having Pepper on board would allow Tony Stark to embrace the void completely. So Harvey didn't care how much void energy Pepper brought to him. And now Harvey has more important things to do. Harvey first changed into loose and comfortable home clothes, and then went to the underground training ground. Harvey opened the hero template, which displayed the logo of the number 1 option. Previously, he didn't know that the more he spread the will of the void, the more hero templates he could choose. What he thought at the beginning was that as long as he had a second chance, he would definitely choose the Big Bug Void Fear Cho'Gath. Because of the double terror evolution ability of Void Reaver plus Void Fear. As long as he evolves more times, his survival ability can be raised to a very high level. Even if he hasn't really grown up by then, as long as he doesn't provoke some gods in the universe, there will be no enemies that can threaten his life. But now he knows that the more people believe in the void, the more opportunities he will have to choose a hero template. Then there is only one best choice for him at the moment, and that is the power of Voidwalker Kassadin. As long as he has Voidwalker Kassadin's Voidwalking, he can go directly to the universe and establish the Void Cult. Blue Star has some big shots in charge. He is not easy to mess around, except for the 9 realms. Other planets in the universe have nothing to be afraid of. Even Thanos doesn't worry him at all. Rather than worrying about Thanos threatening him, it's better to say that he's afraid of the person who got all 6 infinite gems. At this stage, Thanos has not collected 6 infinite gems, so he has nothing to worry about. In the universe, not to mention certain fates that are stronger, there are many races that are born with stronger powers, and they can replace the importance of fate even if they add up. As long as he evolves fast enough, then there is nothing to be afraid of. So Harvey looked at the hero template of Voidwalker Kassadin, and he didn't have much hesitation, so he chose to go on. Are you sure you want to get the hero template of Voidwalker Kassadin? It cannot be changed after selection. The voice of the system also rang in Harvey's mind at this time. It may be because the number of hero templates selected is less and precious. The system asked this question the first time. Confirm. But Harvey had already thought it through, so he finally confirmed it. At the moment of confirmation, a vicissitudes and arrogant voice sounded in Harvey's mind. Few people can trek between different worlds. Kassadin. With the sound of these words, Harvey's mind began to flood with a pile of knowledge that he had never understood. Let Harvey be enlightened, it is mysterious and profound magic knowledge, and the use of void energy. And at the same time, a purple deep stone emerged from the void and then directly merged into Harvey's body. Harvey closed his eyes and stood, and the time passed slowly until it was night. It was Harvey who really digested this huge amount of knowledge. When he opened his eyes again, Harvey's black eyes became deeper and deeper, and there was still a little golden light in the depths. And the world Harvey sees also has a lot of purple energy that he couldn't detect in the past. Harvey found that the world in front of him seemed to have changed drastically, thinking carefully about the knowledge about magic in his mind. Harvey stretched his right hand forward and pulled out a purple void blade directly. The space pulled out by the void blade was distorted, which looked extremely terrifying. At the same time, with a thought, Harvey's body soared into the air, and purple-black magic balls began to condense in the void, traveling around the body. Under the reflection of the purple light, Harvey's temperament became somewhat evil and weird. He doesn't even need to evolve the flight ability, just by using the free magic energy in the void, he can fly directly. Harvey closed his eyes. He was clearly in the basement, but his field of vision was getting farther and farther, directly passing through the material as if overlooking it. Harvey's body vacated and stepped down, a void hole appeared under his feet, and his body turned into a purple light and disappeared. In the next second, Harvey's body appeared in the hall on the first floor. One is the ultimate pursuit of the flesh, and the other is the ultimate pursuit of magic. Before the physical body really grows up, magic is the real master. Harvey couldn't help feeling a little emotional when he saw that he had passed through the wall and arrived at the first floor in an instant as he thought.